I'm Ngaire Woods, and I'm Dean of the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford University. The Kyoto Prize was founded by Dr. Kazuo Inamori in Japan to celebrate the very best international achievements in science, in the arts and philosophy, and in technology. The prize is run by the Inamori Foundation and is held and celebrated in Kyoto every year, as well as here in Oxford. The award reflects Dr. Inamori's vision of a harmony between science and civilization and the enrichment of the human spirit. Sadly, we lost Dr. Inamori in 2022, but we're delighted to continue celebrating his vision with the Kyoto Prize here in Oxford each year. The Kyoto Prize celebrates the kinds of human achievements that humans can only achieve when they live in well-governed societies. And that's why here at the School of Government, we celebrate these brilliant scientists, technologists, people working in the fields of the arts and philosophy. These are things that well-governed societies permit human beings to do with excellence. The previous Kyoto Prize winners are a who's who of brilliant minds and human beings across the world. Primatologist Jane Goodall, the linguistics professor Noam Chomsky, the philosopher Bruno Latour, and this year we'll be celebrating 3 more. The Blavatnik School here at Oxford University is a school with a mission to support governments to improve and to make more flourishing communities for people across the world. The school does this by teaching, through research, which is very applied and takes place alongside governments, and by engagement, by bringing people with very different points of view together and building unlikely coalitions to support human flourishing around the world. It's our great delight to have this collaboration with the Inamori Foundation and the Kyoto Prize, which celebrates the same kind of values, the humility and commitment to serving humankind all over the world. Thank you. It's a particular pleasure to welcome you all this evening and to welcome Lord Hague, our new Chancellor of the University, Ambassador Suzuki from Japan, and the ambassadors from Poland and Finland and the Czech Republic. Delight to have you here, and the emissaries from Canada and the European Union and other countries. We welcome you, as well as, of course, Oxford colleagues and other friends and supporters and people we admire from the school. Some of you have already had the opportunity to listen to William Forsythe give a lecture today, and the other 2 laureates on the stage here with me will give specialist lectures tomorrow. But tonight, over the next 50 minutes, we get a chance just to get to know them a little bit individually, personally, and you can join me in that. And I'm going to welcome questions and clarifications from you as we move along the panel. But let me start with just some short introductions to our panelists, the 3 2024 Kyoto laureates. So on the far left of the stage, the renowned ballet dancer and choreographer, William Forsythe, who will soon be premiering his latest work, Undertainment. So, William, a line from you. What's this undertainment business?
I was actually trying to figure out how the word entertainment evolved. And it's, I guess, Latin, French, entre, between, you know, and like retaining, keeping us together. And I was thinking also about how to, how do you say, secure myself if I didn't promise anything special. It sounds like underachievement a bit, doesn't it? Undertainment. And it sounds like unentertaining a bit because it's a very, very dry work. It's, so ballet is composed of I want to say, 2 or 3 primitives, like in an abstract axiomatic. There is descent, yeah, ascent, yeah, extension, and rotation, and that's it. And from those three principles, you build out. Yeah, and so in this work, I'm simply looking at the fact that ballet is structured on proximity, extension, and folding mechanisms. So all I do is basically I set up a series of almost like algorithms. I want to call them autocatalytic kind of processes. It would be a process that feeds on itself to produce itself even more. It creates these really, really complicated configurations. And it's working quite well. You know, I don't know if it's entertaining, but I think it's incredibly informative. Yeah.
Well, I hope you all get to go see it. William just started with the word undertainment, and for those of you that weren't at the lecture, I think one of the most surprising things was here's a ballet dancer and choreographer whose early training was actually mental and verbal gymnastics. And the ballet training came much later, and you can see that in his answer and in his work. Thank you, William. Our second laureate on stage, moving into the center of the stage, is a geologist who studies glacial deposits that are 600 million years old and uses this to explain Snowball Earth. So, Dr. Paul Hoffman, what does Snowball Earth mean?
Snowball Earth is a climate state in which the ocean becomes completely covered by sea ice, with the result that so much of the incoming solar radiation is reflected back to space and lost that surface temperatures across the globe fall far below the freezing point everywhere at all times. And this state lasted for millions to tens of millions of years, and we now know that it happened twice in fairly rapid succession, the second time ending only about 100 million years before the evolution of complex animals and land plants. And as a result of the cold surface temperatures, the ice on the ocean becomes hundreds of meters thick and flows under its own weight and closes off any open areas that might exist, for example, as a result of meteor strikes. And so the ocean is plunged into total darkness. And there's no primary productivity in the ocean and nothing to eat. And yet, we are here. And it turns out that this state is self-destructing as a result of the slow accumulation of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, from ongoing volcanism. But it takes a very, very long time because you need to increase the carbon dioxide concentration by about 1,000 times, representing about a 25% increase in the equivalent solar radiative forcing. So if the ocean is plunged into darkness for millions to tens of millions of years, it means that only a very special subset of the organisms that had already evolved by that time survived. And yet, all living things are descended from the survivors of Snowball Earth. And that is a very particular subset of all the life that had evolved, including all the forms that did not survive. And the fact that this is a very special subset means that we can look for this evidence, which will be expressed and is expressed in the genomes of living organisms in a way that cannot be understood in the absence of the acceptance of these events.
Well, I can see some of the audience sitting thinking, why didn't I do geology? And others thinking, that's why. But fantastic, thank you. The third and final laureate on stage with me here this evening is a theoretical physicist known for his creation of the first practical invisibility cloak. So, Sir John Pendry, what is an invisibility cloak?
Okay. As a theoretical physicist, you're quite used to people falling asleep as you describe your excitement at your latest research. But we were really very excited about some ideas we had quite a while ago now, about 20 years. And there were two key ideas. One was that you could alter the properties of materials in a different way from changing the chemistry. You could do so, for example, sometimes these structures already exist. So I give the example of silver. You think of silver, you think of mirrors, yes? But you know silver in another form. If you've seen an old photographic negative, the black in it is silver. Nothing added, just silver. What you've done to it is to grind it into very, very fine particles, nanoparticles. And just changing the structure has completely changed it from something which reflects to a material which is some of the blackest material that we know. So that was the first strand, realizing that through structure we could do things that were actually not possible before. And then having all this power, like very often when you suddenly discover a new world, where to go, how to use this power. So you need a design tool, and that was something we called transformation optics, which enabled you to think how exploiting this ability to do not quite everything, but very many things with the material, how you could do extraordinary things. We took our cue from an impeccable source. Einstein had a way of looking at space that wasn't just the boring description of nothingness that we have in the 19th century. He said, well, it's a thing. It's real. It's like another material. It has a property which he called the metric, which is... think of it as refractive index of space. And he said that property, that material property of space, could be changed, for example, by a massive star or a galaxy. And I'll show some examples tomorrow. So we took this idea and said, well, if you can take space and distort it, if you distort space, then Einstein also predicted that something else that happens is that whereas in the Newtonian picture a star can't touch light because it's only a star talking to you or to the Earth or whatever, in his picture, if the star distorts space, light is also pushed around by that. And so we said, okay, we want to push light around. So we went to Einstein's formula, and he told how much you must squash space to send light where you want it to. Now, as far as light is concerned, Einstein's metric is a refractive index, which you can make with a material. So we don't have to have a star or a galaxy to do what we want. We've got a material. So we had these ideas, and I hesitated to go to an audience and talk about metrics and other things and matrices. But we really wanted to impress people. And I was at a conference in San Antonio, organized by DARPA, the American Defense Advanced Projects Research Agency. And Valerie Browning, who organized the conference, said, John, your job is to ginger people up. So I gave my usual boring talk on metrics and so on and so forth. And then at the end, and the room was full of colonels and majors and things, I said, oh, by the way, waking them up, these formulae can make something invisible. And I sat down. So that is an example of salesmanship, I suppose. And if you have a product, an idea in science, you have to be able to sell it to your fellow scientists, and if possible, to the wider world. Selling you to your fellow scientists means that your idea sows seeds. And one of the remarkable things about these ideas about metamaterials, as they're called, is that the seed has really taken hold and grows in many, many places. We first thought of it in the context of light and cloaking, but it also applies to other waves, to sound waves. And one of my postdocs actually thinks he can cloak an earthquake, which might be interesting to people in Japan, I thought. So that's the first thing. If you can sell it to scientists, then it grows. It becomes something bigger than the original thing, and you get feedback of ideas which you'd have never thought of yourself, which is the delight, of course. But the other thing is you sell it to the wider world. You help these colleagues by, for example, after the DARPA experience, Valerie bounced up to me and offered me $1 million contract. So there are these two things.
One of the special things about the Kyoto Prize is that these laureates, who may or may not have known each other before they won the Kyoto Prize, get to know each other very well during the year. They go to Kyoto, they go to the United States, San Diego, and then they come to Oxford. And I've noticed that you have these conversations with each other. And in fact, I was speaking with them, and William said that John had given him a copy of Hardy's book, A Mathematician's Apology, the 1940 book, and from which, and you pick up the story, William. I'd like you just to reflect on what you've learned from each other, or whether there are things you've learned from each other that open up things you'd like to know about.
Well, I was trying to help Bill because, as he said in his lecture, some of his reading when he was a young man was Whitehead's book Principia. So I thought I'd recommend...
No. I did not read Principia. Oh, no. No, I wish I had the capacity to
Well, I'm
read
relieved
it.
because I haven't.
No, my favorite is No, Science in the Modern World. That is
right.
That's a great one. Yeah.
Right, okay.
But you read A Mathematician's Apology.
Yes, I did.
And did you feel that you'd been a mathematician all along in your choreography?
Just the opposite. But there were similarities. I mean, how he thinks about what he calls pure mathematics versus, I guess, other mathematics. He talked about usefulness, whether mathematics should be or could be, or it's sort of an ethos, wasn't it? I think a little bit of about ballet that way. I'm really not interested in using it at the service of narrative. Mm-hmm. I think it in itself is an extraordinary practice. It's really interesting and has perhaps a lot to do with mathematics, and I just don't see why it has to serve that purpose. And that's our it's part of our tradition, but that's what Balanchine allowed, was the abjection of all that.
But that's very interesting to us, that for you choreography is closer to mathematics than it is to storytelling.
Oh, for sure. Sorry. Shocking. Yeah. It's absolutely, because you can't tell stories without the mathematical part. It's all at the service. It's been rendered a servant of. Yeah, and I think that's fine, and it really helped entrench ballet in popular culture. But it does not have to be like that forever. And like I said, Balanchine proves that it was perfectly viable in another form, in its original form. That's what I want to say.
And what about you, Paul? Have you snuck off to some ballet lessons since meeting? Paul is a formidable marathon runner, so he's.
I took eurythmics as a kid, and I love being a frog.
But you were telling me that William's lecture had you thinking about the gait of runners.
I'm a distance runner, and it's a joke among runners that you can identify any friend of yours who is a runner from a mile away. Long before you see their face, you can recognize their gait. Mm. And so I was curious as to whether in dancing, this individuality is expressed or suppressed?
Oh, it all depends on the context, right? I mean, one choreographer would want it expressed, another might want it suppressed. Yeah, I think you can probably, blur a video. Let's say if someone, Tyler Peck, for example, is a current ballet dancer, you would instantly identify her, or Sylvie Guillaume from the Paris Opera, previously former Royal Ballet. You would recognize those images without any face.
And in your own work, are you more on the let each dancer express or suppress and stick to the forms that are in your head?
The forms are a tool for them to express what they know about these foundational aspects. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are, as I said, they perform the living history of ballet when they put a foot on the stage. So I would say that I am the person that wants them. I say the audience wants to know everything you know about this art form. Mm-hmm. You cannot withhold a single thing. I said in the rehearsal, I'm definitely not withholding anything I know about the practice. It's like being a teacher, right? Or it is. And I said, and the same is expected of you. The audience comes to see everything you know about the art form. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So go for it. Go, have at it.
And Sir John, do you find yourself thinking a little more either about geology or ballet?
Well, I was having a conversation with Paul this morning, and no, it was later this afternoon actually, and I was educated actually. I always thought that the Earth was the age it was because of the calculation done about, we're talking about, beginning at the beginning, we're talking about a calculation which Kelvin made many years ago. And he calculated the age of the Earth on the rate of cooling, and assuming that there is no other source of energy within the Earth. And he calculated, I think it was 6,000 or 7,000 years, which he thought was great because it agreed with the Bible, right? Didn't agree with the geologist or whatever. And then along came Rutherford, and he said, no, that's not right. There is another source of heat in the Earth. It's radioactivity. And so Rutherford, being a sort of very forceful character, said, well, I have explained the age of the Earth to the populace. But Paul tells me that's all wrong, and that Rutherford, that radioactivity doesn't contribute anything really to the cooling of the Earth.
Not enough.
Okay.
It would only increase the age of the Earth by about 15%.
Right.
So it's clearly inadequate because Kelvin estimated 25 million, and we now know it's 4.5 billion. The reason why Kelvin was happy with 25 million was that was the age of the sun, estimated by von Helmholtz and Kelvin himself, based on the idea that the sun was a hot body that was profligately losing heat to space and must be cooling. And it was estimated that the sun couldn't be more than 25 million years old, and the Earth couldn't be older than the sun. So Kelvin was happy with his estimate. And also he was happy that it proved Darwin was wrong. Kelvin was appalled by the amorality of natural selection. But it wasn't radioactivity that Kelvin didn't know about. It was thermonuclear fusion. The fact that the sun, like other normal sequence stars, is actually getting hotter and hotter and radiating more intensively over time, and is much, much longer than 25 million years old. So that was what he didn't know, was about the source of energy in stars.
But you told me that he was also wrong about the Earth, and that was for a different reason.
Yes, well, so Kelvin assumed that the Earth was losing heat strictly by conduction, and therefore that the geothermal gradient, that is the increase in temperature with depth that you can measure in mines at the surface, and was his only real observable, continued to increase at a very similar rate right to the interior of the Earth. But of course, this is not true because the interior of the Earth is convecting below the thin skin of the lithosphere, which is only about 100 kilometers thick. For the rest of the mantle, down to 3,000 kilometers, the temperature doesn't change very much. It changes a little bit because of the increase in pressure, but not very much. So by assuming that there was a conductive gradient all the way to the Earth's center, he estimated the Earth being far, far too hot, much, much hotter than it is, and therefore younger. So the other thing that he was missing was mantle convection, not because he didn't know about convection, but because his conductive model gave the right answer. 25 million years, couldn't be older than the sun.
Fantastic. It does make you wish you could have breakfast with these three.
I do. I do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great.
Let me move now to a rather different question. You know, the Blavatnik School of Government is about government. And we're living through quite a momentous shift for many countries in how government is seen. Some of it, not all of it, but some of it emanating from the rather unconventional approach that the new US administration is taking, both to foreign policy. I think speaking from the United Kingdom and Europe, there was a rather sharp intake of breath on Monday, the 24th of February, when the United States voted in the United Nations with Russia and North Korea and against its traditional allies. But domestically, it's a government that is taking aim at, among other things, universities, research budgets, science, judges, independent regulators. So institutions which, in a wider scope, touch on each of your work. And I just wondered, does it affect your work, each of you? And if you had a moment to speak to governments, not the US government necessarily, but to governments, what is it you would want to say to them at this juncture? Great concern on three faces. Paul, you go first.
Well, there is 100% hiring freeze at virtually all universities in the United States at the present time. And yet, from my personal acquaintances in science, I can say unequivocally that the quality of the students looking for their first academic job today has never been as high, the quality, as it is today. So for those people, this is a complete tragedy, you know, compounded by their experiences and difficulty with COVID during, you know, their graduate level years. And I would also agree now with President Garber at Harvard that we cannot have the government telling universities who they can hire, who they can't hire, and what can and cannot be taught.
So on your first point, you're saying you've got better qualified, more talented people, but there are no jobs for them.
That's right, there's a total hiring freeze.
So
those people
help
may
us
be...
here at Oxford hire them, you know. But no, but that's a serious projection into the future for research.
Well, many people in the US, and I disagree with this, say that this is a tragedy because those students will go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And other countries will become better than we are at science. If that was the case, it wouldn't bother me so much, other than the damage it will do to science as a whole. If it was so simple as it could just move and then flourish somewhere else, then that would not make me sad, that in and itself. Because for me, science is an international, it has to be an international with open communications between all sciences. And so I disagree with some people in the US who try to sell science as being essential for America to compete with China. I don't think we should be saying we're competing with China, because if you take that line, the US Congress will say, we will give you the money on the condition that no unpublished information can be shared with our competitors in China. Right. And that would rule out collaboration. So I do not think that that is the way that that the government that you should rationalize continuing support for science in America is to outcompete China.
John, you said yes. Was that a yes, I understand, or was that a yes, I agree?
Well, I agree that the problems we face immediately are very serious. You asked what the role of a scientist was in all this matter, and I think the most serious problem which we can confront, serious as the present problems are, the more serious one is the assault on the truth which we've seen, especially in America, but also in this country, of pseudo-facts being peddled. Of course, it's rampant in Russia, where the media has been seized by the political establishment. What we still enjoy in this country and in America too for the moment is access to the truth. And scientists are part of that access, whether it be on questions like climate change or other key questions that confront us long-term today. So what would I say to politicians? I would wait to be asked for facts, because once you start getting, as a scientist, very excited about an issue, and however honest you are about that excitement, you prejudice the advice you give. And I think a lot of scientists have done that and actually overstepped the mark in selling their truth, as it were. So I think we ought to sit there as a reserve for the public, for politicians, as a reserve of honest facts on which people can then form their own judgment. Because if you don't have access to facts about issues you're deciding on, you can be misled in any way that a politician wants to take you.
And if they never come to ask you?
Well, that is a measure of the politician. But other people will come to ask you. Right. Journalists will come to ask you. And then I think you should respond in the same way. Stick to the facts. As scientists, we're not politicians. We may cast off our role of politicians and as scientists and try to become a politician, but that's not what we're trained for, and it's not our mission.
Mm. And William, what about for the arts?
I premiered a piece in London a few years ago during the second Bush administration. It was called 3 Atmospheric Studies, and it was critical of the administration's activities. And somehow it ended up on CNN for 24 hours, right, globally. Sensation. So in any case, I was doing yoga on the lower deck at home in Vermont. Knock, knock, knock. I was like, who is that? Middle of summer. I live in the woods, by the way. Yeah. So there's a person in a suit and said, we've come to take a census. And I was like, oh, for the county? He said, no. I said, for the city? The city, it's 300 people, for the village. And he said, no, for you. And I said, okay. And I said, this isn't around a year. It wasn't a decade. He said, no, but we want to ask you some questions. And he said, and if you would choose not to answer, we will prosecute you to the full extent of the law.
Wow.
And I wanted to go, it's just a dance, But it became very, very clear to me what the state could accomplish with myself and my life. And right now, I think it's been exacerbated, this kind of, what do you call it, vigilance. Yeah. So I self-censored recently. The entertainment was first called civil society, and it was structured differently, is that it was a self-generating structure And there were very, very complicated rules, but it was up to the dancers to create this sort of ecology of cooperation. Yeah. And I didn't think it was going to be very entertaining, but I thought it was a nice model of decency. Yeah. So, but then I was talking to my wife, and she said, "I bet you're still on that list." And I decided to sort of not draw attention to myself at that moment. There's other things I can do. But at that moment, I didn't want any kind of, because I will have media attention, and just because of what happens when I work. Yeah. So I thought maybe I could accomplish more in another way. Mm-hmm. But I got a scare. I felt frightened, and that person wanted me to feel frightened. Mm. Yeah. And so there you go.
And Sir John, you were saying you don't think scientists should speak out. They should be there to present the facts. Should anybody speak out? Who is it that you would want to see speaking out? Is it the artists? Is it the journalists? Is it other politicians?
It's primarily the journalists.
Right.
They have a key role in transmitting information from scientists and other people, of course. It's not just scientific issues that we're dealing with. It's issues of freedom and so on and so forth. And it's the journalist, primarily the journalist's job to do this communication. And once you compromise the channels of communication and strangle them, then you're into a situation where democracy has failed. It can't function in a vacuum of information.
And Paul, do you agree with Sir John on the role of scientists in this?
No.
I was going to say that I don't know how you can prevent politicians from lying in countries where the electorate is poorly educated and where the press is politicized through ownership. I don't know how you can prevent that. And as far as what in America is called public education, which has been allowed to deteriorate in the US because people of academic ambition and influence send their kids to private schools, I think the lesson is do not allow private education. As Adam Smith said in The Wealth of Nations, education, along with health and support for the arts and sciences, the military and police, is the role of government to provide in society's interest what the private sector would not or could not supply on their own.
But what if the government is Mr. Trump's government?
Well, most recently, Trump has questioned whether his own oath of allegiance to the Constitution.
Quite.
So we've gone from your science, each of you, to politics. One question on the philosopher in each of you. And then I'm going to come to you, and I hope you've got some questions for our laureates ready in your minds. But I think each of you has at various points pointed to what I would describe as the philosopher in you. I think it would be fun for us to know, what is the philosopher in you thinking about at the moment? I remember in a previous year, one of our panelists' answer to this was whether robots should have human rights. So if you can't think of what your philosopher is thinking about, then you can answer that one for us. But anyway, William.
Oh, no.
You talk. No, you don't have to answer on robots and human rights. Well, you're welcome. But you talked in your lecture this afternoon about the philosopher in you.
I did.
Mm.
That wasn't intentional.
But is there a philosophical question that is in your mind at the moment?
It's hard to say, not knowing.
You can point to one of your fellow laureates.
Yeah, these are very complex times, and there's so much to process right now before one moves. It's not like you're going to. I'm not one to just react like that. I'm sort of a glacial person, You know, it takes me a while. And because there is discussion in the artistic community, like how, what, yeah. Philosophy.
John, you've got,
Yeah,
you've got one
I
ready.
would say the categorical imperative.
Yeah, let's give it a little time
Yeah.
to think.
Yeah.
Yes. As you might have gathered from my answer to the previous question, I don't go too deeply in matters outside science. And the philosophical question I have is, what is information? So if I have a conversation with somebody from the arts world, they have a completely different notion of information from what a scientist does. Try it. If you're an artist, ask the scientist what do you think, and vice versa. And a scientist has a very, very, well, not a very, very, but a very different notion of what information is. It's something that can be put into a computer and measured, and it's something which we believe is conserved. So the scientific world, sorry, I'm droning on a bit here about scientific philosophy, but in the scientific world, particularly the physical world, it's often built around concepts which we call the conserved quantities. These are energy, mass, charge, spin, and so on. The more. We believe that information is conserved. So you can lose it, but it's still there somewhere. Okay. The difference with information is this, that if you have some mass and it's there, and suddenly it isn't there, you know that it must have followed a trajectory to where it is. Similarly with a charge, if you have this charge in an electrical circuit and suddenly or not suddenly, it appears somewhere, there's an electrical current connecting it. So momentum is the flow of mass, current is a flow of charge. But the problem with information is you don't actually know where it is. It's something which is non-local. There is no current associated with information. So if suddenly you have a bad accident in your computer and the memory goes, you've lost the information. It's still somewhere, but it's even more difficult to track down than if your computer vanished, for example, because you know that the computer must have followed a trajectory out of the door. Where has the information gone? You don't know. And that's a really profound question which physics must address. It's too big a question for me to even try to answer in my lifetime, but it is a really, really fundamental question. You can make attempts of it, which I did some years ago. If you say the information is carried in an optical fiber, for example, then you can do a calculation because you know that you bottle it in there and it's in that fiber. And then you can calculate and answer a question which is the following, that if I want to transport information from here to there, and I've sometimes captured it so it can't do this funny non-local trick, and you've got it there, and you do have it localized for a moment, then the question is, what does it take to move information around? And the answer is an interesting one. It's that the faster you move information, the more energy you have to supply. And the answer is very quickly. So the flow of energy which accompanies that information is proportional to the square of the rate of information transfer in bits per second divided by Planck's constant. And that's about the only formula I know. There's a guy called Bekenstein in Israel who derived it in a more sophisticated way, and it's now floating around in the astrosphere somewhere, but it's one of the few things we know about information.
Fantastic. We talk a lot about information flows in the Blavatnik School, but I've never heard that formula associated with them, I have to tell you. Paul or William, did you want to add anything on this, or should we take a couple of questions?
No.
We'll take a couple of questions. Any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Yes.
Hello, thank you. That was fascinating. I wanted to ask, so your question, Sir John, I'm basically stealing your question. What is information? Thank you. I'm stealing Sir John's question, what is information? And I would like to ask William that question, because it seems that your answer, and coming back to your answer about the axiom of ballet and the kind of ascent and the descent, I wonder whether your answer is quite similar, in fact, to Sir John's.
Oh, my glacial self is kicking in.
Sorry about that.
I could think about that a long time. Yeah. I'm trying to get to the bottom of things. I'm really happy, basically getting rid of everything. A lot of, let's say, extraneous and superfluous information. A lot of it's historical, has to do with a worldview, has to do with a retrospective and nostalgic worldview in my case. And I'm really interested in what is the simplest form in which it can communicate. Yeah. If I took everything away, what would be the limit? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I really don't understand how the idea that scientists should just stick to the facts and not speak out about the meaning of the facts and the importance of the facts can actually play out in practice. For example, who better than scientists to tell the public what the facts actually mean and what the consequences are for their life? That's a kind of interpretation that's essential to our role in society. A particularly stark example in the United States, in response to the attacks on science, there's a movement called Stand Up for Science. People go out, they picket, they make themselves known to the politicians. These are the young people who have no jobs or who have lost their jobs. Are they supposed to just stand up and say, the fact is we lost our jobs, go home, work at McDonald's? They're taking an activist role, and it's an important thing. And I don't see how, as a scientist and as a person with a role in society, scientists can be asked to just stick to the facts.
Mm-hmm. And I might take the ambassador's comment here in the front, and then I'm going to come to each panelist and have them respond.
Thank you very much. It's actually a question, not a comment. Jukka Sukusaari, Ambassador of Finland. I represent a nation that lives on a geographical area that not that long ago was completely covered by ice. So I find your theory, Dr. Hoffman, very fascinating. How optimistic are you about life being able to survive on this planet with everything that the humanity is at present doing? So if and when there is another Snowball Earth, will life still survive?
And a third and final question, the lady just there.
Well, this is for you again, William, and it's about information in the body. So if it's true that we hold information in our body, memories, trauma, that make up, if you like, how we are and how we move, as a choreographer, are you able, or do you even want to, remove that information from the dancer so that they present something pure in terms of the new information the choreography is providing? Or do you work as a choreographer with the information that's already in their body plus what you will add? The answer is yes.
Yes. Part two. Yes.
You work with what's in their body?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're fascinating. Like I said in the lecture, they're my teachers. Balanchine also said half of what he does is a result of just simply keeping your eyes open in the room, looking at what people are actually doing versus what you would like them to do, or think they should do, put it that way. I can't remember a single process where I actually ever went like that. Mm-hmm. And you go via performer, artist to artist, and they show you how the work should be made, actually.
And Paul, the ambassador from Finland, asks, can life survive on this planet?
Every field geologist knows where the deer flies are because they bite your scalp and they're very nasty. And in my lifetime, deer flies have moved at least 500 kilometers poleward in response to global warming. So this is the response of the biosphere to changes in climate, is migration, poleward or equatorward, depending on which way we're going. And so long before Snowball Earth occurred, microbial organisms had colonized the surfaces of glaciers and environments close to glaciers at the tops of mountains at all latitudes and in glaciated areas of the polar regions. And so when Snowball Earth occurred, and the whole thing happened in 200 or 300 years, so there's not enough time for organisms to evolve, what happened is that those biomes that were already adapted to glacial and near glacial environments, they simply moved along with the ice margins to the equatorial zone of Snowball Earth, which is where you have net sublimation, where dust can accumulate at the surface, providing nutrients, absorb sunlight, producing meltwater. And those organisms, which were probably very similar to glacial biomes that we can observe today, and in fact, they have sufficient diversity to account for all the radiations that occurred subsequent to Snowball Earth. So they migrated to the equator and said, wow, this is great. Our habitat area is so much bigger. And the cruelty of winter here at the equator is strongly reduced. And when the snowball ended and the sea level rose, most of those organisms found themselves in the rapidly warming, nutrient-rich, but biologically depauperate ocean. And some went back to the mountaintops, and others restocked the oceans. And that history is encoded in the genomes of modern organisms. And you can't make sense of those genomes other than through this geological history that we now know occurred not once, but twice.
But Paul, how long have we got?
Well, we're going strongly in the opposite direction at present. Snowball Earths are rare events. As the sun gets brighter, the chances maybe are getting less, but on the other hand, it actually appears from the geological record that glacial periods are becoming more frequent, not less frequent, which shows that there's more going on about the climate system than just the brightening sun. So we can't rule out a Snowball Earth in the future, which would lead to the extinction of virtually most marine life, and certainly would not be very good for most of the inhabitants on Earth, especially animals. But it would not be a challenge to life itself. But the life that would survive would be radically different from the life that existed before. But it would re-radiate as it did in the past. And of course, the one problem with the genomes of living organisms is that they provide us with no record of lineages that are now extinct. They only tell us about the ancestry, the phylogenetic tree of the organisms that are still with us. And so that's where we need paleontology and fossils, including molecular fossils, because those can tell us about extinct lineages.
I'm still not sure if we've got 100 million years or 1 million years or 100 years.
We can't say because the cause of Snowball Earth is not resolved. And there's a great enigma associated with the cause because Snowball Earths are rare events. In the last 3 billion years, there have been certainly 2 and possibly 3. So that's 1 in a billion years. So naturally, you would think that the cause must be either a rare event or a rare combination of less rare events. But the paradox is that there were 2 Snowball Earths in rapid succession within an 82 million year period. 60 to 70 million years of this were in the snowball state. So because there were 2 in rapid succession, it suggests that there was some underlying vulnerability, some susceptibility to this condition at that time.
I
And
love
as we don't know what that vulnerability is, we can't say whether or not we are vulnerable, except for the very basic thing is that to create a snowball Earth, you need to have an ocean that is cold.
Right.
Okay, because the ocean is the largest thermal inertia, the largest reservoir of heat in the climate system. So to make a snowball Earth, say for example a large meteorite strike, it is much more likely to occur if the ocean is already cold. And by geological historical standards, the ocean is very cold today. As a whole, the ocean is within 1.5 to 2 degrees of the freezing point.
Thank you.
So we are vulnerable.
I don't think I'm, rapid succession for a geologist, 60 million years. It's like I'll never hear the words rapid succession without thinking about that. Sir John, the last question was, a question to you that surely your role as a scientist is to interpret what's going on. The young scientists for whom there are no jobs now available, who are picketing or demonstrating or protesting, are surely doing the right thing. That was
Look,
the question.
I'm not, what is right. What I'm saying is not that people shouldn't do that. If you feel very strongly about an issue and you have to let off steam, then fine. What I'm saying is it's often not effective. You can think of examples of that. So take various campaigns that have been. For example, the anti-smoking campaign. People have campaigned against smoking for a long time. They made emotional arguments and so on. That the reason it was banned was work done here in Oxford, actually, which patiently over the years collected the statistics of how people who smoked died of lung cancer. And it took a long time to get those. And I was on the Royal Society Council at the time that report was signed off, about, 40 years ago now. And from that report, which established the facts set in concrete, not to be argued with, it was obvious that what had to happen from that time. You can put as much passion as you want, shouting at people or demonstrating with a placard, but people will say, yeah, but what are the facts? And it's on that decisions should be made in a society like ours.
Thank you so much. Look, from all of us here, first our congratulations to each of you on winning the Kyoto Prize. For those of you who would like to hear more and know more about these laureates' work, there will be 2 lectures tomorrow, one by Paul Hoffman and one by John Pendry at the Blavatnik School of Government. And William Forsythe has very kindly said that we can publish the brilliant lecture that he gave today on our website. So for those of you that missed that wonderful lecture, you'll be able to read it and have fun with doing that. But could you all join me in thanking the 3 laureates for sharing with us this evening?